Hello and welcome at KINO FLO. What we are now doing is a compressed version of our MIMIK micro training. The MIMIK micro training is a compact training format that we are offering to virtual production stages, rental companies, but also to individual gaffers and TPs. The whole idea behind the micro training is really to show you not only what the MIMIK can do, but also how to do it. Before we jump directly into it, let me answer the question why we have developed a product like the MIMIK. The main reason for that is really because more and more LED volumes have moved into our industry over the last couple of years. And the biggest challenge now is how to light the foreground so it really matches the background. As a lighting guy, ideally what you would like to do is, why not just take one of the background panels and use it as your light source, so all the reflections and shadows would match. But the challenge is, usual LED background panels are only RGB, so very poor in color spectrum. In addition, they are not made as a light source, so they are very low in light intensity. So that was like the challenge that we took on. So let's have a look at the essential components that you actually need to operate a MIMIK or an LED volume. So it always starts with the video source, the video file. So you need a video that you want to display on your background volume. That video file can be stored on your notebook, your iPad, or even on your phone. And from there, that video file gets processed by a video processor, which is this box right here. The video processor then distributes that RGB video signal on the background wall. This is how basically every LED volume stage is set up. Now, the MIMIK taps directly into the same video signal as the background wall. Therefore, the MIMIK by itself is already fully synchronized with the background, meaning all the reflections and shadows match. But the real trick is that the MIMIK converts that RGB video signal into a full spectrum signal, meaning we are adding a full spectrum warm white and full spectrum cool white LED. So all your skin tones and general color reproduction is now on point, it really matches. Since the MIMIK already color corrected and added the spectrum, also color grading and post-production can be reduced to a minimum. And all that is really just plug and play, which I will show you in a minute. If you look at the components, you can actually divide them into hardware and software components. And we will now go through these components and in the end we will connect them all together. So let's start with the MIMIK. The MIMIK itself is a lighting device based on the design of LED volume panels, meaning all the mounting accessories that you might already know from LED volumes are also available for the MIMIK. So you can stack them seamlessly together and build walls, ceilings, actually any shape and size that you want. Since the MIMIK is a light source, of course, also all the accessories that you would expect for a light source are available, starting with a gel frame, as well as a special gel that keeps the structure but eliminates the individual pixels, as well as a DOP choice snap grid for lighting control. The unit itself is made from carbon fiber, so it's very lightweight, only 12.5 kilogram or roughly 25 pounds. The unit not only comes with Ethernet in and out, but you can also daisy chain power. So in short, yes, it is true. The MIMIK was designed for virtual production out of the need for a proper light source. But if you look at the specifications, it becomes very obvious that the MIMIK is a classical KINO FLO LED light for the traditional film market as well. So of course it's a full spectrum LED fixture. MIMIK is absolutely flicker free up to 900 frames per second at 30 kHz. And MIMIK is ultra bright, up to 10,000 nits, which is around 12 times brighter than regular LED volume panels. And all of that in a handy package and full pixel control, 7,200 pixels. So as soon as we introduced MIMIK, of course the industry recognized those features. And especially green screen productions have very similar requirements to virtual production. So in the end, you want our superhero to look real in that environment. So what you can do with MIMIK is just use that background template and light the foreground with it. So all the reflections and shadows will match. Same is true for commercial productions. So the first MIMIKs that we sold were actually not to a rental company or a TV station. It was actually to a gaffer from Slovenia. In Slovenia and Europe, they have a lot of mountains and the seaside. So he's shooting a lot of car commercials. And he told us one of his biggest challenges is always how to harmonize the on-location shot with the close-up in the studio. So like you see here, the car is going through the forest along the seaside. Then there is a cut and now you have the close-up. So what he's now doing with the MIMIK is he's shooting a template on location, goes into the studio, feeds that template into the MIMIK and recreates that lighting situation from the on-location shot in the studio within seconds. So MIMIK has not only a very high light output, but also gives you highest control in low light situations, ideal for small locations or tight locations. This is something that could be very interesting in the future, and people, actually our gaffer from Slovenia uses this already. You can live stream images to the Mimic, meaning if you're shooting on location, let's just imagine you're shooting in a forest and you have the moonlight coming through, you can actually just point your phone towards the moon and enhance that moonlight. Or you're shooting in front of a pool or a sea or a lake and you just want the water reflections to be enhanced. Just film those water reflections and enhance them on the subject in front of the camera. So I think there are many ways Mimics can be used, not just virtual production. So that's the Mimic section, and now let's have a look at the video processor. So this slide here is really just to demystify this box. In the end, of course, what you have here is a power switch, a Ethernet connection where we will plug in our notebook in a second, then HDMI in for the video signal, and optional also 4 SDI ports. To the right, you have 8 Ethernet outlets. Each of these outlets can operate up to 30 Mimics. So in total, one of these video processors can operate up to 240 units. So that's the hardware side. Now bring it together with the software side. So for convenience, I like to separate the video source, in this case an iPad, and the control unit on a notebook. But you can also have both running on one device. So the setup here is really just your notebook connected to the Helios video processor with an Ethernet cable. Then we have an iPad connected via an HDMI cable as our video source. And from there's one Ethernet cable going to the first Mimic. If you have more than one unit, you just daisy chain from there. There are several ways of control Mimics, including third-party apps like Assimilate or the Blackout app. You can also control the Mimic through a DMX console. But what we are looking now deeper into is the firmware that already comes with the Helios processor. So once you have connected everything and you switch on your Helios processor, you will see an IP address in front of the display. So you just open up your favorite web browser, so you don't need to download or install any software, it's all web browser based. Type in the IP address and then our user interface will pop up. On the user interface, you already see the template that we want to display, so our video file. To the left, you have all the main menu options, and to the right, you have the features for the selected menu. Since this is a micro training, we are not going through each and every individual menu point, but I want to highlight the 3 most important points. The first one is mapping, then we have input and image settings. So under mapping, you can freely move around the mimics in your template. So you can select the section that you want to display on your light source. This can be very useful if you want to, for example, recreate a 3-dimensional lighting setup from a 2-dimensional template, like you see here. So on the top left, we're catching the reflections from the tunnel lights. On the top right, we are catching the reflections from the top right tunnel lights. And in the center, we are getting the reflections from the front. And now we can really model a 3-dimensional volume. Since the Mimic is a light source, you still have full control about intensity, Kelvin temperature, and you can even control plus and minus green. This is what you do under mapping. Now under input, you can scale and stretch the canvas, our video file. That has a direct impact on the mapping part. This is basically zooming into the image for the Mimic. So with those 3 settings, you are already able to duplicate a scene like here. With mapping, you select the section that you want to display on the Mimic. With input, you scale your image. And with image settings, you can fine-tune brightness, color, and plus and minus green. So the question that we always get is, okay, but what if I don't want to display a video on my light source? I just want to use it as a regular LED fixture. That's possible. So if you select showing test pattern, you can convert the Mimic into a true KINO FLO LED fixture. So selecting test pattern, white, and then you have full control about brightness, Kelvin temperature, plus and minus green like before, like you know from our traditional KINO FLO fixtures. So since we still have like 30 seconds left, I want to go through one additional slide. So this one is something that happened during one of our tests that we did in a green screen environment. So we had a really nice background template, so a thunderstorm, and it looked great on the background. But when we used it to actually light the foreground, the guy looked like a Smurf. So what we should have done in that situation was just go to output and select desaturation. So we didn't knew it when we went into the studio, but we knew it when we went out. So that's a quick overview of our Mimic micro training. I hope you liked it. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to us.